DEI offices now banned in 7 public state systems, most recently the University of North Carolina and all the schools associated with UNC. Other universities have taken smaller steps, like banning the use of perhaps maybe diversity statements in hiring and admissions decisions. What is Ohio State University doing?
Yeah, they're not doing any of that. It's a radical ideology. It forces people to groups of oppressor or oppressed, and it does the opposite of its claims to be inclusive. It's divisive, and it makes racial prejudice okay.
I myself went to Ohio State University. Here's my official Stein that I got for graduating with my MBA back in the 1990s. Very proud of that. Hi everyone, this is Lad Dilgard. Welcome to another episode of Stand and Speak. This will be the last episode of the year 2024, but we hope to bring you a lot more content in 2025. Today's fact of the day: Ohio State University, according to Open the Books, spends $13.3 million on 201 DEI employees, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, or other words, discrimination, enough to cover full tuition to over 1,000 in-state students.
Finally, someone's asking the hard questions like, what would a gay frog say about climate change?
This came out today, and Wall Street Journal last year published a blistering article about Ohio State's DEI complex. And what I want to know is, what do parents who are forking over big bucks for little Johnny to get his engineering degree at Ohio State think of all of these folks making all of this money for navel-gazing, racial discrimination, oppressor versus oppressive kind of ideology at Ohio State University? And so these people are making big money. James Moore, the academic executive director of diversity inclusion, makes $300,000 a year, as does Keisha Mitchell, who is the Office of Institutional Equity Associate Vice President thereof. And that doesn't include benefits, insurance, and all the other public institution benefits that someone in there gets. And they are doing what exactly for that money? So I go down to Tara Brandstuhl, the compliance specialist for the Office of Institutional Equity, who makes $149,000 a year. What would a compliance specialist do at Ohio State University in diversity, equity, and inclusion? My guess is that she goes to other departments or any departments and makes sure that they're complying with directives to get things like diversity statements, or there's the correct ratio of races in the department, or are you selecting people for professor jobs based on DEI things or on merit? But there is a lot of questions that need to be answered. One of the first questions to answer is, how is this occurring in a red state that has went for Trump 3 straight times, has a supermajority Republicans in the legislature, Republicans in every statewide elected office, but this is happening in Ohio? What are Republicans doing about it? I remember hearing Senator Matt Huffman a couple of years ago at a fundraiser saying, we got to do something about Ohio State. We got to do something about the woke stuff. The fact that the former president at Ohio State hired 50 plus diversity, equity, and inclusion BIPOC professors to address racial grievances in the wake of the George Floyd death and the BLM riots. And Mr. Huffman said, we got to do something about that. That was a couple years ago. I don't know what's been done about it, but apparently it's still there. According to the Wall Street Journal, DEI-related studies include gender and sexuality as socially and culturally constructed phenomena that affect our personal lives, artistic expression, social relationships, and the ways we think about ourselves and the world. Courses include Sexualities and Citizenship, a survey of cultural, social, and political issues related to historical and contemporary lesbian experience in the United States, as well as my favorite, Queer Ecologies, Gender, Sexuality, and the Environment. Now, I wonder, when Thomas Jefferson was setting up the University of Virginia or Ohio State University was being formed in the late 1800s, if they thought about, I hope someday our grandchildren study queer ecologies, gender, sexuality, and the environment.
Finally, someone's asking the hard questions like, what would a gay frog say about climate change?
I can't imagine what kind of navel-gazing nonsense goes on in that classroom. I know I don't want to pay for it. According to the Wall Street Journal's analysis of 800 pages of diversity faculty recruitment reports at Ohio State, a search committee seeking a professor of military history rejected one applicant because his diversity statement demonstrated poor understanding of diversity and inclusion issues. So the reason I bring this up is because the cost of $13.3 million for diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff at Ohio State is much greater than that. The DEI people are clearly filtering out applicants, qualified applicants to positions at the university based on this nonsense, which means, and not on merit. So this means that we're not getting the best and brightest for our taxpayer money at Ohio State. Further, it's costing us in terms of quality of instruction. It's costing us additional in terms of compliance, whereas this compliance specialist, I'm sure she's asking for documentation. I'm sure she's asking for information across departments. That costs money. That costs money that our taxpayer dollars are spending to fulfill her requests. So if you think that the $13 million is bad, start thinking about what the real cost of DEI at Ohio State is. So 29 DEI-related employees make between $100,000 and $269,000 at Ohio State University. Now, DEI has been backpedaling. They're being rolled. These policies are being rolled back at companies like Walmart, Tractor Supply Company, Ford, and the list of universities that recently ended or rolled back DEI policies include Iowa, Boise State, University of Michigan, University of Texas, University of North Carolina, Iowa State, Northern Iowa, and the University of Utah. Again, how is this not happening at Ohio State? And, we're all in Ohio here. We're football fans, and we want them to win the national championship and all of that stuff. So why is the university that taxpayers are funding and parents are funding, why are they pushing this oppressor versus oppressed and this divisive racial ideology that is diversity, equity, and inclusion? Now, I got news for some of these folks. It isn't 2020 anymore. People have woken up to this not being healthy for a society to continually focusing on these racial grievances and taking money out of taxpayer pockets so they can fund a long list of highly paid DEI professors and administrators to do what exactly? Are they increasing graduation rates? Are they increasing the number of skilled tradespeople who are available? Are they on the cusp of innovative engineering technology? They're not doing any of this stuff. So here are some of those top 10 highest paid employees, DEI employees at Ohio State. Noelle Arnold, she is the Associate Dean of Diversity, Inclusion, and Outreach, $270,000 a year. plus Ohio State's benefits, which I understand are quite good. Now, do you know anybody making $270,000? That's up there. I don't know what percentage that is. That's got to be the top 5% of all employees nationwide. Melissa Mahan, she's the Associate VP of Office of Institutional Equity. So we not only have the Diversity, Inclusion, and Outreach, but we have the Office of Institutional Equity. We've got the Women's Gender and Sexuality Study. We have Institutional Equity. We have Diversity and Inclusion. I mean, we got all kinds of programs. These are unbelievable. Shannon Winhurst is a professor in the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. She makes $173,000. Yolanda Zapita, she's the Assistant Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion. She makes a cool $171K. Andrea Williams, Academic Director, Diversity and Inclusion, $170,000. You know what's kind of funny to me? One man on this. James Moore, he's at the top, and then 3, 6, 9 women. So, you know, I know a lot of companies, if you had 9 men and one woman in positions that paid this much, you might be getting a talking to from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So apparently they only, in these very highly paid VP and assistant VP positions, I think it seems like they lean towards women. Treva Lindsay, Professor, Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, $157,000. So I could go on. And my compliments to Open the Books for exposing this. It is something that needs to be exposed, and there's a lot more behind the curtain on this stuff. So how did we get here? So Ohio State has had some of this stuff for a while, but in 2021, Ohio State's now disgraced and removed President Christina Johnson, pledged to hire 50 professors and 100 additional underrepresented BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous, people of color, positions at the university. And now we're seeing the results of that. So we're loaded with DEI hires. We're spending heavily on non-value add, race and gender-based introspection, and we're just wasting money on this. So what happened was George Floyd died of an overdose, and people saw a video of him. Like it or not, this is what happened. Derek Chauvin was called a murderer. They had riots. They burned down part of Minneapolis. BLM riots spread across the country, and people started forming defund the police movements. And every person who had a checkbook at an institution in 2021 started spending our money out of guilt over George Floyd's death. They changed the Cleveland Indians name because of it. They did all kinds of crazy stuff because of it. So now we have to, because of the George Floyd thing, we have to keep spending this money to make everybody feel better. Now, I can see this happening at Harvard and Yale and other cesspools of leftist intolerance. But for this to be happening in Ohio or Indiana or any sane red area, this is just doesn't make any sense to me. And so, you know, right now women outnumber men on college campuses 60-40. We've dropped, as we've shown on this show, as the United States, we've dropped to 24th in the world if we're lucky, and even lower than that in math and sciences. Our education system is not the envy of the world it used to be. And here's a good example as to why. We're spending resources, we're spending money on stuff that doesn't help, that doesn't add any kind of value at all. So we're short on technical skills, on engineering. We're short on trades, on things that really matter, but we're spending money on queer ecology or whatever the heck that means. So recently, the Republican Party just got into a intramural scrimmage about H-1B visas and the talent that we need to import legal immigrants from overseas, which Donald Trump has always been in favored of well-vetted, talented, skill-based legal immigration, versus, hey, let's save these jobs for Americans. And then a lot of people are saying, well, Americans aren't educated in some of these areas. They're just not. So there's a big struggle going on about that, a good dialogue. But, in that argument about legal talent and immigration versus let's make our education better, let's start here. Let's start with spending money on things that matter. So every university, top to bottom, they should be looked at as spending money on things that matter and removing things that don't. I saw another article this morning that my wife sent to me, which is how many universities countrywide are struggling to survive, to keep their doors open. I know Wittenberg University has had a lot of problems here in Ohio, at Springfield, of all places. And just a lot of universities are struggling to attract students. Now, if you're a young white male, and you're going to get skewered when you go to Ohio State or some other school about your whiteness and have to defend yourself as being an oppressor. Maybe you don't want to go to school to learn queer ecology. Maybe you want to just start working or to go to a trade school or something else. So universities are hurting. The American educational system is hurting. And we only have things like this created by Christina Johnson and the left and all of this garbage that adds up to $13.3 million a year on DEI spending. We only have that to blame. So that's my message for today. You can find me at Lad Dilgard on X or on YouTube at Stand and Speak. We hope you hit that subscribe button. We hope you share this with a few people that you think could appreciate it. And we hope you have a beautiful New Year's and a great 2025. Thank you from the Stand and Speak Show. Bye-bye.